said, this is what it means. I've come to my garden, i.e. my chuppah, Lamakam Shahayikaru B'Techila, the place where I originally was, the Ikar Shechina B'Tachtonim Haises. The Midrash says, because the main Shechina was in the lowest place. It was on this earth. And the idea is that we have to draw it back down. That's what Hashem says, I've come to my garden, my chuppah, I returned. You brought me back. And the concept is, the whole purpose and intention of creating all the worlds is what? Right? This is a sort of a classic understanding. As I said, everything in this mimer is classic. Like the whole generation is based on it. But this you will find, like in almost every sikh and almost every mimer, you have to first know what you're doing here, right? And there's actually different reasons given in Kabbalah and Midrash and Hasidus why the world was created, right? So according to some opinions, it says that Hashem created the world because Teva HaTov Lahitiv. It's the nature of someone who's good to do good. So it's just like a natural thing that he created the world because he's good, right? The Arizal says that he wanted to, that Hashem created the world because he wanted to bring everything which is in his potential to actual. That all which is Bekoach needs to come Bepoel because like it's a necessity that all that Hashem could be is. So the world sort of had to come out. The Zohar says, the Zohar says that Hashem created the world in order so that he could be known, so that we could know him through the world, right? And the Midrash says, why did Hashem create the world? For this is a quote from the Midrash. Because Hashem desired a dwelling place in the lowest worlds. And ultimately, Hasidus, there's many Maimarim on all these different reasons, and Hasidus sort of concludes that this is the highest one. Why? Because all the other ones are an actual reason. Right? Why Hashem? Because this, because that, because this. This one, there is really no because involved in it. The reason is because he wanted to, right? The first word is Nishava Kadosh Baruch Hu. He desired. And the idea of a desire is that a desire is higher than reason. You don't have to have a reason for your desire. It's something intrinsic that doesn't have a reason because the world actually is beyond reason. It doesn't mean that those other answers are wrong. It just means that when you are sort of living a life in a world based on those other answers, you're accessing a level of Hashem which is cloaked in reason. And that's not the ultimate level of Hashem that's available. And so since the level of Hashem which is higher than reason is specifically available in this world, therefore the real creation, the real purpose for creation is to get your hands on something which is beyond reason, the unreasonable essential level of Hashem. And therefore the ultimate real reason for creation is because Hashem desired. Because now that there's a creation, you can access the level called desire, which is beyond reason. Does that any of that make sense to you guys?
Is this instructing us like...
Yes, it makes sense or not really?
Yeah, it does.
How you doing over there?
That's very good.
We can go through it again maybe.
Is this instructing us in the order of like Hashem's like inherent like construction of reality? Because like we know that like the sphere attributes of like what exists within the infinite bounds of Hashem, and in order for creation to exist, like the supernal man, the sphere. But then when we get to Keter, it's like, okay, Keter is like the expression of Hashem in higher levels. But then, like, is this instructing us, like, before that, like, there was a divine pleasure that took place, and that was Hashem's, like, initial point of, like, wanting to potentiate something.
Yeah.
Like, there was a pleasure. There was a pleasure.
It's not necessarily a pleasure in something. That's the only difference. It's just Hashem in his place. What is God? He's like something which is this essential pleasure, right? It's not so much that in order to enact that pleasure, he needs to do anything. It's just that he created the world so that the creation can actually, so that this level could be experienced by us. But maybe you're right. Maybe there is some kind of a essential pleasure in that can only sort of come out. Like, when he has this delight from this world.
Because like what comes before Keter comes like
let's say Atzmus, whatever it is.
Atzmus, yeah. But before Atzmus comes like his will.
There's no before Atzmus.
The wheels of Keter.
The wheel is Keter.
So pleasure is Atzmus?
I'm saying anything you're going to call something is a little bit. Keter has a lot of different names. It's will, pleasure. but we're talking about, let's say, the Panemius of Kesser, the Panemius, I don't know, we're not naming anything so specifically right now. The idea is just something, the original, right? What's beyond all understanding. And so the point is that level, right, is somehow, you can like harness it specifically when you make a dwelling place for Hashem in the lowest worlds. That's what it really means. Hashem desired a dwelling place in the lowest worlds, which means when there will be something called a dwelling place in this lowest world, that level of Hashem's desire comes out and can be accessed. And therefore, isn't that really the ultimate purpose of the world? That the highest levels of divinity can be accessed. So you need to create the world, and you need to make a dwelling place in that lowest world in order for that to happen. And so therefore that's the real, so to speak, reason, but it's not based on something rational. It's just based on the fact that that's how Hashem's essential pleasure gets hatched. In any case, this is the reason for the world. Why are we here? What are you doing here? Hashem wants a dwelling place in the lowest world. He desires. So there would be a revelation of godliness below, specifically through man's work. In other words, you can have a lot of different reasons that you think you're alive. You're trying to get this house. You're trying to get this pleasure. Like, what are you doing here, right? At the end of the day, you have to understand what you're doing here, because why were you put here? Because Hashem decided that through your specific avoda of man, right? That's nice that there's like infinite universes and Mars and galaxies far, far away. It's a wonderful, gorgeous universe, but Hashem didn't make those things for themselves. Right? Everything that's in creation was so that man, you, right, could serve God by drawing godliness into a place where it otherwise would not be through a two-pronged avoda called iskafia and ishapcha, which is subjugation of the Yetzer Hara and ultimately transformation of the Yetzer Hara. So the whole existence is really such a small thing inside of you, right? It's for you. The neshama tered lamata lislavish beguf v'nefesh bahamis. The soul descends lower and lower to encloak itself into a body and an animal soul. And their function is to conceal and cover over the light of the soul. Right? This is like what Hashem did on purpose. Because if he wants a dwelling place in the lowest world, he has to first construct something called the lowest world. Which means he has to intentionally hide himself to the point that it looks like he's not here, but on the contrary, that the place runs itself. There is no God, and that in fact, like he even creates things that actively go against and fight with him. Why would he do that, right? Because he wants there to be something called the lowest place. So he has to conjure up something called the lowest place, so that it would then serve his purpose of nonetheless, we will then subdue it, transform it, and then bring godliness specifically into the lowest place. So the negative reality is an absolute necessity of the construct of what Hashem desires out of this thing. Right? The purpose of the body is to cover the soul. And despite the fact that you were wrapped in this casing whose function is to conceal your soul, nonetheless, you work on it. And you refine it, and you purify the body and the animal soul. Not only your animal soul, your actual body, but your portion of the world, the people around you, your wife, your children, your house, your community. You like make Judaism live inside of the world around you against all odds, despite the fact that Hashem has put up against you a nemesis who is like designed to conceal you. So he basically puts you into this war, right? And this is his delight, that you should somehow bring and like achieve victory in the godly element and put down the concealment. And that's what the pasuk is saying when Moshe Rabbeinu was told by God to make a mikdash. He was saying, make me a mikdash and I will dwell within them. Not within it, but kol echad ve'echad, but within each and every one of them, because ultimately you're the mikdash. Right? What is a mikdash? It's basically making in the desert, right, which is filled with snakes and scorpions and dangerous. It's called the Midbar Ha'amim. It's the nation of the world, which is basically a metaphor for the whole world, right? We're just like surrounded by gullus and anti-Semites, 70 nations all trying to kill us. And in the middle of this, you're supposed to just make a little house for God, right? And then ultimately, not only do the nations not destroy this house, but ultimately they're going to come and worship at this house. This is what it means, make me a mikdash. It's basically the whole plan. And how do you make this mikdash? Through this service of transformation, subjugation, and transformation. Now here comes kind of a very key line from the Zohar. And it says, Kamaimer, Kadiskafi Sitra Achra, Istalik Yikar Dekuchabricha Bukulu Almi. Right? Get this line in your head and go around with it all day long. It says, when you subdue the Sitra Achra, Istalik Yikar Dekuchabricha Bukulu Almi. Then what does the word Istalik mean, first of all? Anyone? Talk about the Histalkus of tzaddikim.
Histalkus, like it's not the Histalkus. I forgot what it was. I know what it is.
Lesalek. No, okay. So usually it means to remove. And that's what we call the Histalkus of a tzaddik, is like their yurtzeit, right? Because they were like removed. But really the word here is used in the exact opposite function. It says, when you will subdue the Sitra Achra, the other side, the dark side, Istalik here means to reveal the glory of Hashem in all the worlds, right? So we're going to have to delve into why the word for to remove also means to reveal. And I'll just kind of tell you right now so we don't have too much suspense. There's certain levels, like for example, when a tzaddik passed away is the perfect analogy. And by the way, this of course is the Yurtzeit Mimer, right? So he's really talking about, and the Rebbe brings this concept that I'm going to say out very clearly, that when you lose a tzaddik, right, you could say, oh, he's left, it's a histalkus, he's gone, there was a removal of something, right? But the reality is, we know tzaddikim don't really die, right? Their life is a spiritual life. You may have stopped seeing their body for a second, but does that mean their energy, their essence, their selves have gone away? Not only have they not gone away, but on the contrary, a greater level of that tzaddik has now revealed itself. And it's a level of the tzaddik which is actually beyond the pale of containment. And that's why the container actually had to go away for this new level of the tzaddik to actually surface. So the word for and that is all indicated in the Hebrew language. It's a beautiful thing. The word istalik in the Zohar means to reveal, even though the general name of the word means to conceal. Because certain things, when they go away and they seem to be concealed, it's because it's actually a revelation of a higher energy which you can't see, right? But it doesn't mean that it's not there. It's actually the emergence of something, not the removal of something. And so what he's saying is what he's ultimately going to wind up saying here is that when you subdue the Sitra Achra, how would you think you would subdue the Sitra Achra today? Because it sounds like something like mamish, like from like a Superman situation. How are you going to stand up and subdue the Sitra Achra? What can you do to subdue the Sitra Achra?
Instead of sleeping, you come to class.
Simple, right? Something does not take mamish like seemingly some kind of a giant. It's something very simple, right? And yet, what's the result of subduing the Sitra Achra? This is what the Zohar says. You have a revelation, and not just any revelation, right? A revelation at the level called histalkus, which is something which is like beyond revelation, becomes revealed in all the worlds, right? And so there's like this unleashing of divine energy that happens just from your pushing yourself, right? So your life is exceedingly meaningful, right? We don't realize what's going on. We're like pushing all these little buttons in the supernal world. Like it says in the Tanya at one point, that when you see a shadow moving on the earth, right? Just like a half an inch or a centimeter, in order for that to happen, literally not like some supernal world, but with the sun, right? There's a ball of gas like billions of miles away, moving at like breakneck speed for huge distances, billions of miles across the galaxy, right? In order for you to see this little tiny shadow move. That's a reality. So you can see that this thing with scale is very strange. Like what happens in our little perspective in this tiny little miniature version is literally taking place in other areas, and it's like moving universes, literally, right? So this is not just a physical example. This is also something, if that's true in just the sun, how much more so then there's greater distances traversed when you're dealing with the spiritual world. And so a little tiny movement in this world actually is something global and universal, which we just don't see it. But that's the reality. That's why there's so much reward for this work, right? Because it's not easy, because Hashem puts you into a body that wants to sleep. And it's your nature to want to sleep. So why would you overcome this nature? What's in it for you? So it's because you're making a dwelling place for God in this world. You're like making your soul burst through, and you're completing the ultimate desire for which all the worlds were created, which is the craziest thing. It's in your hands. That's what it says. You make a mikdash, and you make a mikdash. It's not just some communal effort from Am Yisrael in the desert with God on a mountain. We all have this potentiality, which is like basically right there in your hands to subdue the Sitra Achra and therefore reveal the glory of God in all the worlds. Did you want to say something?
No, I remember reading. I can't remember where it was or what mimer it was, but like when a tzaddik dies, it like he detonates a spiritual bomb, because like Hashem like it's like when someone gives tzedakah and they're like, for every dollar you give, I will give $1. Like Hashem goes like, for every mitzvah that a tzaddik did, he passes through his chesed, and like at the point where the tzaddik actually dies and is removed from the earth, the entirety of the tzaddik's lifetime of goodness is like imbued into the earth.
Right.
Like a spiritual bomb just like detonates, and that's what takes us up levels. That's what takes us up different levels. I just remember that from something that I read. I can't remember which mimer it was, but
the point being, it's a huge revelation.
Yeah.
Right? It's not a concealment. It's a revelation.
But the point of the line was like, so that we shouldn't be sad that tzaddik dies. We should be joyful, because like the entirety of all their work can't come to fruition until the tzaddik dies.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's certain sadness involved in it, but it's not because there's not a greater thing happening. It's just because like it's a change. Like you kind of get used to being able to talk to the tzaddik in his body. So I mean, there's a certain element for sure of sadness associated with it, but the sadness itself is a revelation of some kind of a intense emotion that you wouldn't normally have access to. But yes, ultimately, it is a higher dimension of this tzaddik, and that's the point. The stalkus, removal, really means the revelation, and that's the actual simple meaning of the word in this passage of the Zohar. But there's much more in this passage that we didn't see yet. So it's again, let's learn it again. Let's say it again. Kadi skafi sitra achra. When you subdue the sitra achra, istalik ikar dekuchu brichu b'kulu almin. You reveal the glory of Hashem in all the worlds. Now, mashakasu b'kulu almin. What do you think it means when it says you reveal the glory of Hashem in all the worlds? I would think on first reading that it means that there's many worlds. And when you do this thing down here, you get out of bed early, right? You reveal the glory of Hashem in all the worlds, or even late, but in class time, right? You reveal the glory of Hashem in all the worlds, which means the glory of Hashem comes in this world, comes in this world, comes in this, it gets revealed in all the worlds. That's not what it means. That's what it seems to mean. That's what the whole next part of this passage is going to explain to us that it doesn't mean that. He says, a kavana al madregas haor dahavi bikulu almin b'shaveh. When it says that there's a revelation of God's light in all the worlds, it's referring not to the revelation that takes place in each and every world, but on a level of light which is equal in all the worlds. What level of light is equal in all the worlds?
Hashem's light.
That's all Hashem's light. And why would it be equal in all the worlds? Isn't the truth? How is something equal in all the worlds? If, for example, take your body, which has several worlds in it. You have your mind, you have your heart, you have your action, let's just say, right? So your world of your mind has all kinds of sophistication inside of it. You can perceive intelligence. Your heart doesn't have such a potential to perceive intelligence. At best, it perceives feelings. Your hands don't even perceive feelings, right? They just have the minimal enlivening energy to move and to have action. So how can you reveal, what does it mean that the level of light which is equal in all the worlds? What level of light is so you would have to think maybe it's like some kind of the smallest, the lowest common denominator, right? But no, the idea is that there is a level of light, as you said, Hashem's light, Sovev, you're sort of indicating to it. It's a light which is infinite. That's the point. What we just described is different gradients of finite light. So the mind is, let's say, 1 billion, and your heart is 1 million, and your hands is 1, right? But there's still, so to speak, a finite container of how much information or how much godliness can be revealed, because the container holds so much. One person's intelligence is different than another person, right? Well, we're dealing with Hashem's infinite light. So none of the containers can hold it at all, seemingly, right? Because how can you put something infinite inside of something finite? And yet the reality is, the infinite light, if it's truly infinite, there's no place that it's not. There's no place that it's not. Hashem's infinite light is found everywhere. There's no place that it's not. The only thing is, because each and every world has a finite container, that level of light, which is infinite, is completely imperceptible to those worlds. Because even though it's flowing through them, like right now, the Or Ein Sof is everywhere in this room, right? It's inside of you, it's outside of you, it's in the air you're breathing there, because nothing can exist without God being there. And God is the infinite God, the Or Ein Sof, everywhere at once. So he's not allowed, if he would allow any of that to come into our little vessel, we would like drown, basically. We wouldn't, our finite vessel would explode with an overflow of infinity, and we wouldn't be able to exist. And so he blocks us from seeing it. He doesn't block it from being there. He blocks it from our being able to perceive it, so it doesn't disturb our finite functionality. But it's in there. And if it's in there, then guess also what it is. It's in each and every vessel equally. Because the highest vessel also equally cannot perceive it any better than the lowest vessel. It doesn't matter how big your tank is. If it's an infinite amount of water, you can have a tank as big as a stadium. It's not going to help you carry that infinite water. So the infinite water is there in a way. This is what we mean when we say Sovev. There's something called Sovev Kalam, the light that surrounds the world. It doesn't mean that it surrounds it externally. It means it surrounds it from being perceived. It's basically when we say surrounds, it surrounds your ability to perceive it, right? You're unconscious of it. Let's use that word. So the Sovev light is the light that's there that you're unconscious of. So I don't care if you're a 1 or a million or a billion, you're going to be equally unconscious of that light, because so long as you're a finite anything, you have no business like internalizing or becoming conscious of that light. It would negate your existence immediately. You following this?
Yeah.
So then let's go back to this statement now that we're saying, which is insane. When you get out of bed early, it's just such a simple thing. But it's the work. It's what we were put here to do. You don't have to move mountains. You reveal the glory of Hashem, not that is in all the world, but that's equal in all the world, which means the Sovev, infinite light, which even the highest divine worlds cannot internalize. When you get out of bed early, that's the light that you reveal. Now, that's also another reason why we call it istalik, right? Because you can't really reveal this light in the normal sense, because if you revealed it, it would negate everything. But it reveals itself in a way of like this unseen presence comes and emerges inside of specifically the place where you are, where you did this avoda of iskafia. So the only place that this insane light can actually come out and show itself, strangely enough, is in the lowest of all the worlds, inside of a Yetzer Hara of a Yid, right? Because only when you have iskafia, which the subjugating in Yetzer Hara only happens here. In the worlds of Yitzira and Bri and Atzilus and Ak and Arich Anpin and Atek Yomi, none of these worlds have iskafia in them. You cannot subdue anything because they're not low enough to create the opposition. Only in the lowest world where there is opposition can you actually fulfill this idea of subduing, like connect to Hashem's essential pleasure that comes out when you subdue the Yetzer Hara. And therefore, what is this nishava Kadosh Baruch Hu Hashem desired a dwelling place in this lowest world? It means this level of desire emerges that we spoke about a minute ago. It's the same thing as this level of histalik. There's a level of sovev light which emerges and can all of a sudden hatch specifically in the lowest world when you fight your Yetzer Hara. And in no other way can it happen. So we have an ability to release a level of divinity that the highest of the highest of the highest worlds cannot, specifically because we're in a low place where hiskafia is a tool that we have available to us. Following this? You get it?
The essence of the hiddenness of the work that we do lends to the fact that we make an impact without even knowing it. And that the work that we do here has more meaning because we don't even realize its meaning.
Okay, I'm not gonna. Yeah, that's like a haiku or something, but it sounds good. It sounds good. Okay.
Rough.
Yeah.
Question. So you said that the light essentially surrounds this world.
Yes. What does it mean surround though?
It means that it's not in the world. Well, no, it's
unconscious.
in the world, but we don't know it, so we're not able to feel it.
Right.
So then you had said that the light also surrounds the higher worlds
Equally.
as well, right?
Yeah. The same way we can't perceive it, they can't perceive it because it's infinite.
But why wouldn't they be able to
Perceive it?
just because we can't?
Because ultimately they're only different from us in a relative scale. In other words, let's say we have a level 1 consciousness, they might have a level million consciousness. So there's definitely things they can perceive that we cannot, just like your brain can perceive things that your heart cannot perceive. So there's definitely what we call Hishtalshlus, and the higher you go, the more can be contained. That's if you're dealing with something containable to begin with, right? In other words, whatever they're experiencing in the world of Atzilus, which is way, way higher. It's a level of a trillionaire compared to what we can perceive down here. Right. There's still a trillion of them. If you count to the end of a trillion, you're done. It ends. So there's a vast ability to perceive, but there's not an infinite capacity to perceive in the sense that something which is uncontainable, you still can't fit into something that holds a trillion. You can fit a trillion into something that holds a trillion. You can't fit infinite into what holds a trillion. And therefore, just like we have no perception of the infinite, they equally have no perception. They're not closer to the infinite just because they hold a trillion. Oh. Because it's just as far away from them as it is from us. Mm-hmm. So there's something which this is actually an interesting thing. It actually unites all the worlds. It makes it that no matter how big you are, you're really not much bigger than me because you're equally small in the eyes of Hashem. So the comparative difference between us becomes negated and becomes nothing, right? Like in other words, literally nothing. Like 1 over a billion equals 0. 1 part of a billion is 0. Takes away 0 from a billion. 1 over infinity. Infinity. That's what I meant to say. 1 over infinity equals 0. In other words, how many parts have you taken out of infinity if you took 1 away? None. You've diminished infinity, none. A billion over infinity equals 0. If you've taken a billion out of infinity, how many have you diminished infinity? 0. So therefore, what does that do? It makes 1 and a billion equal to each other. They're both equally ineffectual when it comes to reducing infinity. So therefore, even though you think you're such a big shot, you're a billion, you're not any bigger than me when it comes to infinity.
So tzaddikim essentially right now, right, aren't exactly feeling the best level that they can because Mashiach, like when Mashiach comes in this world, will that essentially bridge the gap of like the infinity that you're saying? That meaning there won't be any distance.
It's already bridged. No, because even when Mashiach comes, there's essentially 2 different things going on, right? There's something that equates us all, and there is something called a Seder Ishtalshlus, which just differentiates us all. Now, even though the differentiation is basically insignificant in comparison to what we have in common, it still doesn't mean that there's no reality to the differentiation. In other words, when Mashiach comes, we're still going to have high and low. It's just that we're going to realize simultaneously that ultimately that's a relative distinction, and the low is not intrinsically lower than the high. It's just in a relative scale, there is still such a thing as, for example, there's still going to be Cohen, Levi, Israel, right? There's still going to be animal and plant and man. Like there's still going to be like a division of powers, but it will come shining through that each one of those those places on the ladder will equally be able to show the essence of Hashem come through it. Let me give you an example. You kind of took us into a different direction. Yeah, they'll have equal access, right, to revealing essence from no matter what place they are on the ladder.
So even in the
because the essence is found equally in all of them.
Right, but I'm saying even in the like top world, right now where the tzaddikim dwell, that world will be equal to this world in terms
yes
of
and no, right? It'll still be like, let's say, man in comparison to rock, but man and rock will both equally be able to reveal essence.
The light that surrounds us,
right?
Be able to,
right. And what's fascinating is that at this particular juncture in creation, the only place that level of essence light can be accessed, it's not in Atzilus, and it's not in Bri, and it's not in Yetzir. It's only in your body and your Nefesh Bahamis that has the ability to unlock the essential light, which is actually equal in all the worlds. Right now, it's saying none of the worlds can get to it, right? But you can. Because why? Hashem said, Nishava Kadosh Baruch Hu, can you guys just chill for a second? Nishava Kadosh Baruch Hu Yos Lizbar Dir B'Tatum. Hashem desired a dwelling place in the lowest world, which means this level of desire, which is the Sovev light. What is desire? Desire is sort of like another way of saying Hashem's infinite pleasure, which is that which is beyond the worlds, right? When does that come out? When you have iskafia. When you're in the lowest world and you do this action, somehow it emerges that which is equally hidden in all the worlds right now. You somehow make it, and that's why there was no Mishkan of Hashem in Yetzirah. And the angels all got together. They said, "Why don't you give your Torah to us?" He said, "No, it belongs down in Mitzrayim with Moshe Rabbeinu, where they have a Yetzer Hara, because only way of accessing the essence, which is Torah, which is what the angels were clamoring over. They wanted the essence of Hashem. Why are you giving it to the humans?" And Hashem said, "No, it's because the only way you can access the essence is when there is resistance. And when you overcome this, because whatever reason, that's what makes me happy. That's what will allow the essence to emerge." And so even though we're sort of sad that we live these like lowly human frail lives, and we can perceive like in our minds like angelic dimensions of like heaven and perfection where there's no war and we like dream about Mashiach, the reality is in the midst of this war, we have our hands on the most precious commodity in all of existence, which is the essence of Hashem, which can only be revealed through our little hands, because we're in this war and because we are in a state of concealment. It's like it's an eye-opener. It's good news. Good news Thursday. Okay, so going on. From inside, he says, Hainu or Hasovi Kolomim. What is this world that's light that's equal in all the worlds? When it says, when you have Iskafi, you reveal the glory of Hashem in all the worlds, it doesn't mean in each and every world according to its level. It means you reveal a level of light which is equal in all the worlds, i.e. the Sovev light. Right? Shemeir Bechola Olamos B'Shava, which shines in all the worlds equally, i.e. it doesn't shine in them. That's what makes it equal. They're all equally unable to perceive it. Now he takes us through a little story. When it comes to worlds, there's different levels. You can't compare the higher worlds to the lower worlds. In the higher worlds, the light shines openly. In other words, that there's the vessels which hold the godly light are very refined, and they don't cover and conceal and snuff out the reality that what's enlivening them is actually God. We don't have that experience, right? We don't realize that we just think we're alive. We don't realize that the life force which is in us is mamish God. So the life force gets kind of like concealed by the thickness of the vessel, that it doesn't allow a clear revelation of godliness to shine through. But in the higher worlds, whatever beings are there, the notion of their sense of self does not overshadow the reality that what's enlivening them is God. And so they're in a constant state of praising of Hashem for the very life force which is flowing through them. The in the lower worlds, the light does not shine so clearly. And so there's levels where the light doesn't shine so clearly, but then as you're going down, but then there's even levels where the light gets fully concealed, right? So in other words, if you have, let's say for example, water in a glass, if it's a clear glass, you can see the water, right? If it's a green colored glass, you know what I'm saying, but it's still glass, so you can see the water, but it kind of makes a change on it because you're seeing it as something other than what it is, but you can still see that there's water in the glass. But all of a sudden you have like a thick metal mug, right? The container completely conceals the reality that what's inside of it is godliness, right? So the lower you go, the thicker the vessels become. At first they're revealing God, then they're revealing God a little bit less, then they wind up actually concealing God. And that's why we can walk around this world being created by God every second and thinking that there's no God and like whistling down the street doing whatever we want because he put the godly light into something which is completely wrapping itself around it so it cannot be perceived. And he says, when it comes to concealing the light itself, there's different levels. And this is all sort of indicated in Psukim, where it says that my left hand founded the earth and my right hand stretched out the heavens, right? And it says in the Midrash, similarly, Nata Yaminu Bara Shamayim, he stretched out his right hand and made heaven, and he stretched out his left hand and he made the earth. So why do we need to know this? Like, in other words, these are like sort of children's stories that like a child could perceive. You know, God stretching out his hands, what's he doing? But it's all like Kabbalistic secrets, that the right hand is the stronger hand. And when it says Hashem stretched out his right hand, he makes the heavens, he put more divine light in the heavens, and his left hand, which is hand of contraction, he made the earth where there's less godly light. Right, so but the idea that he creates the world, the heavens with his right and the earth with his left, is telling you that there's this descent of power and of the vision of godliness as you go down through the world. But you do it the Yad Yamin Moral or Vagili Yoser, the right hand shows on more revelation and light, and that's what it means. V'yamino tivcha shamayim, that his right hand spread out the heavens, because shamayim, the heavens, is intended to mean the higher worlds. Sham Hagil B'chinas Yamin. There you have a revelation from, so to speak, the right side, more of the reality of unleashed chesed. Shu Gilui Or, which means there's a revelation of light there. Right? No one's going there and scratching their head and wondering if they should serve God that day. Right? Just, all there is God everywhere, and you see him and you're like, it's like a phenomenal revelation that actually negates you from even having free choice. Right? The whole notion that we have free choice in this world is specifically because Hashem took away the revelation. That's why angels don't have free choice, because how can you not serve God in the presence of so much light? Right, so there's a lot of light, and the light is revealed. Because remember, there's two different things. There's the light and the vessel. So there could be a lot of light or a little light, and there can be a vessel which reveals or a vessel which conceals. So even if you have a lot of light, but the vessel is blocking it, that doesn't help you either. So in the higher world, you have both good qualities. You have a lot of light, and it's light which is also revealed light. Whereas the Aretz, when he says the earth, his left hand, it's referring to the lower worlds, which is left. So right away when you're talking left hand, you're already talking about less light, right? So even if you have less light, you could still have the light be revealed, right? And that's the idea, as you, let's say, come from like Atzilus to Bria and Yetzira. Let's say already, those are sort of like more going with the left hand, but the left hand is less light, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it blocks godliness. It's just less godliness. So the creatures who are praising Hashem in the lower, higher worlds, like Bria and Yetzira, they're not basically perceiving as much glory of Hashem, but they're still all day long perceiving the glory of Hashem. But when you have a left hand and it comes so low that the light is so minimized that it's actually able to be completely concealed as well, that's already when you have the left hand that goes that the light itself is also in a state of Helen Vehester, that the light becomes concealed. It's not just small amount of light. It's a small amount of light that now can no longer be seen. And this is turning the page. This is the difference between the four worlds. The ksiv. Now, this is now another, like every line in this is just sort of like, I say classic because there's full Maimarim dedicated to like many of these individual lines. So when you see, you get excited because it's a pregnant concept. But in general, this notion, right? This is brought down. This pasuk is brought down in Pirkei Avos as well. And it says, when this comes to describing the four worlds, there's a pasuk which pretty much like is the ultimate description of them. And it says like this: Kol hanikra bishmi lichvodi, all that's called in my name and my glory. Berasiv yitzarsiv afasiv. It says he created it, he formed it, he even made it. So that's actually a verse which literally has the words Bria, Yitzira, and Asiya in it. And before it says Bria, Yitzira, and Asiya, it's like there's a hint to the world of Atzilus, which is all that is called in my name. The word my name, which is basically Yud Kei Vav Kei, is another way of saying the world of Atzilus, which is like the pure, unfiltered name of Hashem. So you have in this verse a mentioning of the four worlds. Shem Dalet Olamos Abiyah. Those are the four worlds: Atzilus, Bria, Yitzira, and Asiya. And he says, Bezeh or Enu Kamoshu Batzilus, Kamoshu Babiyah. And the first distinction we're going to make, and we'll sort of leave it off today with this, is that even though there's four, we're going to right away divide them into 1 and 3. Because the first one is completely incomparable to the other three together, to the point that we say there's like Atzilus and the lower three worlds. Because the lower three worlds are already in a different categorical dimension than the world of Atzilus. And that's why the lower three worlds are mentioned by name, whereas Atzilus is called my name and my glory, right? Because it's like, it's not in the same category. And he says that Atzilus, all right, let's hold here. We're holding. Atzilus tomorrow.